Okay, number two in terms of distractions of sales management, operational problem solving.
Here's what I'm saying to you here. Let's say, for example, that you sell buckets, okay? And every time there is some sort of breakdown in the bucket manufacturing procedure, you know that that's going to affect your ability to have the buckets delivered. So then you're getting involved in the bucket manufacturing to see if they can expedite this thing. And here's something to make it worse. Your company has been manufacturing and selling buckets for 40 years. But every time you do something, it's like the first time it was ever done. So operational inefficiencies quite often drag sales managers into the issue. For example, and I'll tell you why. In a book I wrote last year with Dr. Larry Steinmetz called How to Sell at Margins Higher Than Your Competitors, he had done some research that said, okay, what is the one thing that will never ever allow you to charge a premium price for your product or service? Delivery problems. So sales managers figure that out, so they try to get into the operational issues to make sure that the inventory is there. And so now they're looking at inventory levels and they're doing administrative work. And the sales force is out there saying, help me, and nobody can help.
And so what do? Do you just extract yourself from the operational problem solving? How do you manage that problem if you're not supposed to be involved in it?
What you do is you try to manage from the top with it. Whoever's in charge of some of these operational things, you need to let them know very clearly, succinctly, and I don't care if it creates problems. We are having these issues. Please advise me when they're resolved. But I'll tell you what happens. We want to protect our salespeople. They're embarrassed out there in the field because things aren't being done right, and we want to expedite the solution. At the risk of sounding bitter about this, maybe some of these operational people ought to go out and interface with unhappy customers and find out what it's like to be driving up and the guy's saying, oh, I'm going to get this person 3 or 4 times. And I'll tell you what, the operational difficulties will probably work themselves out more quickly.
All right. Fighting for respect for the sales function.
I'm going to suggest, Rick, that most companies have to define their culture. Now, let me give you a quick example of this. Some companies are marketing driven, some are sales driven, some are operational driven, some are operationally driven, some are administratively driven, some are R&D driven. You know, here's what happens. If the sales function is not in the top 2 or 3, the sales force is always in trouble. Because what happens is there's short shrift paid to them. Because it's the only profession in the world that looks so easy, yet is so difficult. So what happens is, people are now saying, I don't know if we need a sales force. Every time Bob and Susan come in here, they create problems. Listen to this one. They sell stuff we can't deliver. They sell things we don't have. Well, they do. That's what operational, and so what happens is you end up fighting a war to defend the sales function. So think about this for a minute. You're doing a lot of administrative stuff. You're trying to put out fires about the sales function's performance. And then you're also involved in operational difficulties. You're also doing order involvement. You're handling customer service problems. And again, where's the sales force? Out on the street saying what? I don't know how to sell. And you know what? They're not asking the right questions. They're not selling value. They're prematurely quoting the price. They can't overcome sales objections, right? Or price objections. And so what happens is the whole thing tends to collapse. And you, my friend, are the leader of that organization. So you better tend to your knitting. You better stay at what's important to you.
But what do I hear you say that, but I know that there are sales managers listening to this saying, well, that's easy for you to say, Bill. But if you worked at the organization that I worked at, where we are having troubles with operations, we're having trouble getting respect for sales, I'm overburdened with administrative work. What do you say to those sales managers who are not being able to overcome those difficulties?
At the risk of sounding cavalier, some of them may have a decision to make.
So if you're not able to delegate to the people who are really responsible for those efforts, and try to get them to fix these things, and they don't get fixed, then maybe it's time.
Then maybe after you give it a good shot, you say, I'm not so sure that this is the right place for me.
But the key here, that you're obviously getting at, is you shouldn't be distracting yourself unnecessarily, going off and doing these things instead of staying home.
Arbitrarily.
Arbitrarily.
And what can
doing
happen, although a lot of this stuff is a pain in the neck,
Mm-hmm.
it at least is done inside the confines. You don't have to get in your car, go out and see any people, get on an airplane, and that desk gets pretty comfortable.
Do you think some people get involved in these distractions because they want to get involved in these distractions?
Frankly, yes. They're tension relieving rather than result producing activities.
That's what I think.
Yes. Now, I'm not casting stones at everybody because in some cases that stuff is thrown at you. I've been in those kind of jobs. And frankly, I had one as a very high-level executive. In fact, I was the president. And I was involved in everything except what I thought I should be, and I really resigned from that company. Because that's not what I've been put on this earth to do.
Other distractions, you mentioned this, order tracking, inventory issues, customer service, all the same thing, isn't it? Really?
And all related to sales, because sales includes service. Service is sales.
Mm-hmm.
Inventory, how can you sell something if you don't have any inventory? But the truth of the matter is you shouldn't be involved in the inventory. You're not the inventory control person. It's the inventory control person. What you need to have is an overall effort, and sales needs to be one of those efforts.
We have been talking about how to hire good people, but how in the world is a sales manager coming into an organization know in advance that he or she is not going to run into an organization that is going to trap him in a lose-lose proposition because he's not going to get the kind of support he needs in inventory and order tracking and customer service and sales function respect and operational problem solving? What does the sales manager have to do before he takes that job to make sure he doesn't get sandbagged on all this stuff and gets distracted?
Look at this broadcast again. Look at those issues and ask those questions before you take the job. Talk to the person who's in the job currently, because in many cases, maybe that person is being promoted or leaving, and ask how much of your time do you take on this? How much of your time is required to do that? You see, one of the things in life, Rick, listen to this one, it's a whole lot easier to get into something than it is to get out of it, no matter what it is.
Afraid so.
Okay?
Let's talk about what sales managers ought to be doing. Hiring, coaching, and retaining.
Yeah. Number one, hiring the right people. Number two, coaching those people to greatness, which means you have to go out in the field to do it. And then retaining the top performers. See, the name of the game is not losing people. The name of the game is retention. And if you hire the right people and you coach them the right way, and if you have the right compensation plan, etc., they should in fact be retained. Now, the interesting thing about it is the only thing worse than no turnover is high turnover. So you want to have some, so you're constantly swirling the mix a little bit and raising the bar, as we've talked about in other broadcasts.
What is your favorite method for retaining good people?
Bribe them. No, I'll tell you what I think it is. It's like a friend of mine wrote a great book on leadership, and here's what he said. He said, if you're going to be a great leader, he said there are two things that are prerequisites for being a great leader. Number one is impeccable integrity. Your word is your bond. Your commitment is your commitment. The way that you think and the way that you feel and the way that you act are all integrated. The second one is timely personal feedback. Let me give you an example. If someone is terminated from a job and they're surprised, it's the manager's fault. Because they've let this thing, they didn't face the truth. They didn't face the reality. Mm-hmm. So what I try to do is three things. I try to lead by example. I try to have impeccable integrity. And I try to give timely personal feedback.
Interesting that you have not mentioned commission, you've not mentioned salary, or anything like that, which is what I expected you to talk about. I would think that would be the key to keeping a good salesperson.
Well, here's what it is. If you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So what you have to do is when the person comes on board, you have to have a pay plan that they can live with. I'm not going to be held hostage by anybody who comes to me and says, I have a better opportunity, I can earn this. I say, go. Because we know what we can pay and what we can do. Mm-hmm. Now, we probably will be doing a broadcast about compensation plans, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. But what you have to be able to do is to have a reasonably decent base. This is what I like. And then the opportunity to earn significant commissions and bonuses based upon performance above a certain level, so that frankly, the sky's the limit, but you don't go broke paying them.